So I read that Nixon was actually an intellectually astute man, finishing the third in his class from Duke University. But Donald Trump was something different. He was known as not only intellectually uncurious, but also he rides on this wave of intellectualism because people feel they are not respected by the intellectual, by the educated. So my question is, how could our day-to-day, person-to-person discourse remedy this toxic, polarized public discourse in the backdrop that lots of people vote for Trump just because of this discontent towards intellectual hubris? How should the solution be when the solution itself has become part of the problem?
On Nixon, you started off by saying he was astute and well, intimating that he was well-read and well-educated, and you contrasted that by saying essentially that Trump was not. Trump is educated. I mean, he got an education, but Trump is spectacularly ignorant. There's no question about his ignorance of our history, of things going on in the world. It's quite astonishing that a president of the United States, that's not to say he's not smart. I would never go there and say he's not smart. So you're
talking about how do we break down the divide between elites and people who feel assailed by elites.
Right. And incidentally, I think one of the things Trump did in this campaign is he really articulated something that nobody else did about the failure of elites. I think there's some pretty demonstrable truth to the failure of the so-called elites over the last 40 years. If you look at what institutions in our country really have been working over the past 25, 30 years, you might say the military, you might say tech, you might say the entertainment business. I don't know how many institutions you would say really do function well after that. So Donald Trump's analysis of some things, I think, was more acute. Whatever prejudices it might have appealed to in some ways, whatever the nativism, whatever the latent or not so latent racism of aspects of the campaign, the misogyny, all the rest, nonetheless, there's some really acute things that were observed by candidate Trump.
Fundamentally, that our institutions often work in favor of elites.
That's right. And also that the elites have failed us. I think there's something to that. But to your question, how do we rise above this and become the country we were, if you're talking about in terms of person-to-person comity and respect for points of view? And I don't know. I'm going to give. I really want to know what David thinks about this too.
Well, look, I'm just going to say this.
Let me just say one thing here. I have always.
You don't really want to know what I think, do you?
I do. I want to know what I do. But I've always been an optimist about the country until recently, and my only real optimism stems from the time I spend with young people.
Yeah.
And that has convinced me that in terms of policy, what you're talking about, what can we do? I think there's one thing that can change us as a country and might offer some hope over generations. Compulsory national service for every 18-year-old in this country. You can go into the forestry service for a year and a half, go into the military, work in a hospital. In the Vietnam era, I'm not proud of my military service because I tried to avoid the draft, so I went into the reserves. But my experience—
You could be president of the United States.
My experience in boot camp in the Army is seminal in my life. Being thrown together with a group of people different from your own backgrounds, with a common purpose, kicking ass, and it can be really transforming.
Right.
And so I think
national
service is the one transformative idea I can think of for the country.
Well, and I think that there was something about our politics and the post-war era that resulted from people from different backgrounds serving in one common cause. I agree with you. I probably have time for now. I'm being told
But
one
you
more.
didn't answer. Go ahead, answer the. I want to know what about how you see the future
Well,
politically,
first of all,
culturally.
I agree with you about young people. It's one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm inspired. I'm inspired by young people, but I also believe that there is a cyclical nature to our politics, and I'm interested to see what the reaction to the Trump era is, because you know, we can go one of two ways. We can try and replicate Trump. The left can try and replicate Trump and match his anger, and win its base, or someone could emerge and try and appeal to the values that we do share, the concerns that we do share as a country, without ignoring the differences that we have. And you know, I believe that very well may be the next turn of the page, but we shall see.